A luxury SUV's door slams shut. A woman's face, etched with fury, glares through the grimy gas station glass. Her voice a piercing shriek. "You're a thief!" She shoves a crumpled receipt forward, her own trembling finger obscuring the very line that proves her wrong. The stale, recycled air of the prime gas and go tasted of burnt coffee and desperation. It was a taste Caroline Vance was unaccustomed to. She preferred the filtered, ionized air of her corner office, the subtle scent of leather in her German-engineered SUV, the crisp, clean atmosphere of the gated community she called home. But here, under the unforgiving flicker of fluorescent lights that made everyone look vaguely ill, she was just another motorist trapped in the purgatory of a Tuesday afternoon commute. Her day had been a cascading series of minor humiliations. A seven-figure deal she'd been cultivating for months had stalled, the client suddenly getting cold feet. Her son's school had called, again, about his disruptive creative expression, which was a saccharine euphemism for drawing anatomically questionable aliens on the history classroom smartboard. To cap it all off, she'd spilled a turmeric latte down the front of her cream silk blouse, a stain that mocked her with its stubborn saffron yellow persistence. The gas light on her dashboard had been the final insult, a blinking, beeping demand on her already overdrawn emotional bank account. Now, sitting in the driver's seat, the engine momentarily silent, she glanced at the receipt she'd snatched from the pimply-faced cashier. Her eyes, sharp and trained to spot discrepancies in complex legal contracts, scanned the flimsy piece of paper. The numbers swam for a second before snapping into a hideous criminal focus. $89.90. The figure seemed to vibrate with malevolence. $89.90 for what? She'd pumped the gas herself, the pump clicking off somewhere around the $65 mark. She knew her tank. She knew its capacity, its moods, its consumption rate down to the decimal point. There was no universe in which she had just put nearly $90 of premium unleaded into a three-quarters empty tank. A hot, familiar fury began its slow climb up her spine. It was the same fury that had propelled her to the top of the city's most competitive real estate market. It was a righteous, clarifying anger. This wasn't just a mistake. This was theft. A blatant, opportunistic attempt to fleece a woman they assumed was too busy, too distracted, too rich to notice. They had picked the wrong woman. She didn't just open her car door. She kicked it open, the heavy panel swinging out with a percussive thump that echoed in the concrete cavern of the station. Her heels, impractical for driving but essential for projecting authority, clacked an aggressive rhythm on the oil-stained pavement as she marched back toward the glass doors. The little bell above the door didn't so much jingle as it shrieked in alarm at her entrance. The cashier, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, was wiping down the counter with a limp gray rag. He had a faint shadow of a mustache and the weary, perpetually startled eyes of someone working a double shift. His name tag read Liam. "Excuse me?" Caroline said. The words were clipped, each one a shard of ice. Liam looked up, his rehearsed customer service smile faltering slightly at the sight of her expression. "Yes, ma'am? Can I help you?" She slapped the receipt down on the counter. Her manicured finger, painted a shade of aggressive crimson, stabbed at the total. "This is wrong. This is fundamentally, outrageously wrong." Liam blinked, leaning forward. He picked up the receipt, his brow furrowed in concentration. Caroline watched him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her jaw set like concrete. She could feel the eyes of the other patrons on her. A man in greasy overalls buying a lottery ticket, a young mother trying to wrangle two squirming children, and a box of donuts. Let them watch. They were about to see a lesson in consumer advocacy. "Let's see," Liam mumbled, his finger tracing the lines of text. "Pump number 7. Premium, looks like. $65.40 for the fuel?" "Exactly!" Caroline snapped, cutting him off. $65.40, not $89.90. It's a simple case of subtraction, or in your case, a simple case of fraud. The word fraud hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. The man in overalls stopped scratching his ticket. The mother pulled her children a little closer. Liam's face flushed a blotchy red. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I understand why you're confused, but it's all itemized here. You have the fuel for $65.40. And then you have the ultimate shine car wash for $20 and a go-go-go energy drink for $4.50. He pointed to the lines with a slightly trembling finger. It adds up to $87.90 plus $1 tax. $89.90. Caroline stared at him, her expression a mask of disbelief. The explanation was so absurd, so insulting in its simplicity, that it only fueled her rage. A car wash? An energy drink? I did not purchase a car wash, and I certainly didn't purchase that chemical sludge you call a beverage. I got gas. That is all. Are you calling me a liar? No, ma'am, of course not, Liam stammered, his professional composure starting to crack. I scanned the items. I remember you putting the drink on the counter, and when I asked if you wanted a wash today, You nodded. I nodded, she repeated, her voice rising in pitch and volume. You think a non-committal twitch of my head constitutes a binding contract for a $20 car wash? I was on the phone. I was closing a multi-million-dollar deal, something you and your GED couldn't possibly comprehend. I was distracted. You took advantage of that. The injustice of it was staggering. This boy, this child, was trying to twist her momentary inattention into a narrative of consent. He was painting her as a forgetful, scattered woman, while he was the one who had clearly, deliberately patted her bill. Ma'am, please. There are other customers, Liam pleaded, his eyes darting to the growing line behind her. I don't care about other customers, she boomed, her voice now ricocheting off the shelves of junk food. I care about the $25 you are actively trying to steal from me. This is your job on the line. This is your integrity. Do you have a manager? Or are you the only one running this little grift operation today? My manager is on her break. Then get her. Get her now! Or I swear I will call the police and have you charged with theft. I will call corporate and have this entire franchise investigated. I will own this godforsaken gas station by the time my lawyers are done with you. Her threats, wild and disproportionate, filled the small space, sucking all the air out. The mother, wide-eyed, finally gave up, herding her children out the door without their donuts. The man with the lottery ticket slowly backed away toward the exit. Caroline felt a surge of triumph. She was clearing the field, isolating her target. Liam stood frozen, his face pale, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. He looked trapped, a rabbit caught in the high beams of her fury. Ma'am, if you'll just look at the receipt. I have looked at the receipt, she shrieked, snatching it from his hand. She held it up, shaking it violently. It shows $89.90. It shows a crime. That is all I need to see. In her rage, her thumb was pressed firmly over the middle of the paper, crumpling the very itemized list Liam was trying to show her. All she could see was the top line with the station's logo and the bottom line with the damning total. To her, everything in between was just the fine print of the crime. I demand a full refund. Now, she commanded, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. And I want your name. I want it for my police report. Liam's resolve finally crumbled. His eyes welled up with tears of frustration and helplessness. I can't give you a refund without my manager's code. And I didn't do anything wrong, I promise. Oh, the waterworks. How pathetic, Caroline sneered, feeling nothing but contempt. Crying isn't going to save you from grand larceny. She leaned forward, her face just inches from his, her voice a venomous whisper. Give me my money! A deep, calm voice cut through the tension from behind her. Ma'am! That's enough. It wasn't loud, but it had a quality of command that made the air itself seem to snap to attention. Caroline spun around, ready to unleash her fury on this new interloper. He was a tall man dressed in a simple polo shirt and jeans. He had been standing in line behind her, patient and silent, holding a single bottle of water. His face was impassive, but his eyes held an unnerving stillness, a complete lack of agitation that was somehow more intimidating than her own rage. This doesn't concern you, she spat. The man took one step forward, his gaze not on her but on the crumpled receipt still clutched in her white-knuckled fist. Actually, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. It does now. You're causing a public disturbance. But more than that? He paused, and his eyes finally met hers. They were sharp, analytical, and utterly unimpressed. You're wrong. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply reached out, not to her, but pointing a steady, unwavering finger at the paper in her hand. Move your thumb. The man's command, move your thumb, was not a request. It was a structural fact, a shift in the architecture of the room. The air, which Caroline had filled with the storm of her own outrage, suddenly became still and heavy, dense with a silence that was more damning than any shout. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in the cage of her own making. For the first time that afternoon, a sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through the hot armor of her indignation. "I will not be ordered around by," she began, her voice a reedy imitation of its earlier power. But the words died in her throat. The man's eyes held her, calm and unblinking. He wasn't angry. He wasn't emotional. He was simply waiting, a granite pillar of certainty that made her own blustering feel like a house of cards in a hurricane. Behind him, she saw Liam, the cashier, his tear-streaked face a mixture of fear and a desperate, burgeoning hope. Slowly, resentfully, as if pulling her hand from a flame, Caroline shifted her grip on the receipt. Her crimson-painted thumb, the very instrument of her certainty, slid away. And there they were, the words she had violently refused to see printed in the same plain, black font as all the others. Ultimate Shine Wash, 20 Dew Go 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 Energy Drink, $4.50. The world tilted on its axis. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz with a mocking intensity. A memory, fragmented and unwelcome, surfaced from the chaotic fog of her earlier phone call. Standing at the counter, the phone pressed to her ear, nodding impatiently as the cashier, Liam, mumbled something about a car wash special. Her hand, acting on its own exhausted autopilot, reaching into the cooler and grabbing the brightly colored can, a desperate grab for caffeine to get her through the rest of the day. She had done it. She had bought the items. The realization did not land gently. It was a physical blow, a punch to the solar plexus that knocked the breath from her lungs. A tidal wave of shame, so potent it was nauseating, washed over her. Every word she had screamed, every accusation she had hurled, every threat she had made, replayed in her mind, now recast in the horrifying light of her own error. Fraud, thief, grift operation. I will own this godforsaken gas station. The sheer, unrestrained arrogance of it all made her skin crawl. But shame, in a constitution like Caroline Vance's, was an unstable element. It quickly transmuted into something else, a desperate, clawing defensiveness. This couldn't be her fault. It was a trick. A setup. This is misleading, she stammered, waving the receipt, which now felt like a confession in her hand. He mumbled. The sign for the special is tiny. It's predatory. He took advantage of the fact that I was on an important business call. The calm man's expression didn't flicker. So your distraction is his fault? He asked, the question simple yet devastatingly effective. He wasn't arguing. He was just holding a mirror up to her logic, and the reflection was grotesque. He should have been clearer. He should have confirmed, Caroline insisted, her voice regaining a trace of its shrillness. She was flailing, searching for a life raft of justification in an ocean of her own making. It was then that the little bell above the door jingled again. A woman in a navy blue prime gas polo shirt with a Sarah Manager name tag stepped inside, holding a half-eaten apple. She stopped dead, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Liam, pale and trembling behind the counter. Caroline, red-faced and defensive. And the tall, unnervingly calm man standing between them like a referee at a match that had already ended in a brutal knockout. "What in God's name is going on here?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp with authority. Before Caroline could launch into her newly revised narrative of corporate malfeasance and misleading sales tactics, Liam spoke. His voice was shaky, but for the first time it held a note of steel. This lady," he began, pointing a trembling finger at Caroline, "accused me of stealing from her. She said I committed fraud. She screamed at me, threatened to call the police, threatened to sue the store. She said she'd have me charged with grand larceny." As Liam recounted the tirade, the calm man subtly reached into his back pocket and pulled out a slim leather wallet. He didn't flash it around. He simply opened it and placed it on the counter for Sarah to see. Inside, behind a clear plastic window, was a detective's badge. Caroline's blood ran cold. The floor seemed to drop out from under her. A cop. Of all the people in all the gas stations in the city, she had chosen to have a complete, unhinged meltdown in front of an off-duty detective. Sarah, the manager, looked from Liam's distraught face to the badge, then to Caroline. Her professional demeanor hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Is this true?" she asked Caroline, her tone leaving no room for excuses. "It was a misunderstanding," Caroline said quickly, the words feeling like ash in her mouth. "I misread the receipt." "A simple mistake." "A simple mistake?" Sarah shot back, her voice like ice. "My employee is in tears. My other customers have fled." "You threatened him." "You threatened my business." "You accused him of a crime, detective," she said, nodding to the man. "That could ruin his life. That goes far beyond a simple mistake." The detective finally spoke again, his voice still level, but now carrying the full weight of his authority. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Caroline directly, "making a false accusation is a serious offense. What you did here, the public disturbance, the verbal assault, the baseless allegations of theft against this young man, is significantly more than a customer service complaint." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You were so convinced you were the victim that you didn't hesitate to become the aggressor. You didn't check the facts. You just attacked." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing the last of her inflated self-righteousness. She stood there, exposed and utterly humiliated, the stares of the manager, the detective, and the cashier burning into her. The power she had wielded so recklessly just moments before was gone, leaving a void filled with a chilling new reality. She wasn't the powerful executive putting a lowly clerk in his place. She was a middle-aged woman in a stained blouse who had just screamed her lungs out in a gas station because she couldn't be bothered to read a receipt properly. She wanted to disappear. To rewind time, to simply get back in her car and drive away. "Look, I apologize," she mumbled, the words feeling foreign and clumsy on her tongue. "I've had a very stressful day," Sarah scoffed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "A stressful day does not give you the right to abuse my staff. We have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior." She turned to her computer terminal, her fingers tapping furiously on the keyboard. The security cameras recorded the entire incident, including the audio. Caroline felt a fresh wave of horror. It was on tape, her entire disgraceful performance preserved in digital clarity. Sarah stopped typing and looked up, her eyes hard as diamonds. "Caroline Vance, that's the name on your credit card?" It wasn't a question. "Ms. Vance, for the safety and well-being of my employees, you are hereby issued a formal notice of trespass for this location and all Prime Gas and Go properties in the state. You are no longer welcome here. If you set foot on our property again, we will have you arrested." The detective gave a slight affirmative nod. "I'd advise you to take that very seriously. Banned." She was being banned from a gas station chain. The indignity was absolute. Stripped of her power, exposed as a fool, and now formally exiled like a common troublemaker. The consequences the detective had spoken of were no longer abstract. They were real, and they were immediate. Caroline stood motionless, her face burning with a shame hotter than any anger. In her hand, she still clutched the evidence, the receipt proving her error, the car wash voucher she could never use, and the energy drink she no longer wanted. She had come in seeking justice for a crime that never happened, and in the process had become the only one guilty of an offense. The walk from the counter to the automatic glass doors was the longest 10 yards of Caroline Vance's life. Every molecule of air seemed thick with judgment, pressing in on her. She could feel the 3 sets of eyes on her back, Liam's, wounded and wary, Sarah's radiating a cold professional contempt, and Detective Hale's, analytical and dispassionate, observing her retreat as if she were a specimen under a microscope. The cheerful jingle of the bell as she pushed through the door sounded like a final, mocking peal of laughter at her expense. Outside, the world had the audacity to be normal. Cars hissed by on the wet pavement, the sky was a neutral, indifferent gray, and the air smelled of rain and exhaust fumes. But for Caroline, the scene was surreal. as if she were walking through a dreamscape built from her own failure. Her SUV, a fortress of black steel and tinted glass, waited for her. It had always been her sanctuary, a private bubble where she was in complete control. Now it felt like a defendant's box. She slid into the driver's seat, the supple leather feeling cold and unwelcoming against her skin. She shut the door, and the ensuing silence was absolute and crushing. There was no one to yell at, no one to blame, no one to deflect onto. There was only her, and the raw, unvarnished truth of what she had just done. The carefully constructed dam of her composure didn't just crack, it disintegrated. A ragged sob tore from her throat, a sound so raw and ugly it barely sounded human. The tears came then, hot and furious, blurring the pristine digital dashboard into a kaleidoscope of meaningless lights. They weren't tears of remorse for Liam, or for the havoc she'd caused. They were tears of pure, molten humiliation. She wept for her own shattered self-image, for the loss of a battle she had so arrogantly initiated. Her eyes fell on the passenger seat. The garish neon green can of Go 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 energy drink sat there, its condensation forming a perfect ring on the leather. Beside it lay the receipt, a flimsy white flag of her surrender. With a snarl of disgust, she snatched the can and hurled it into the back seat, where it struck the window with a dull thud and clattered to the floor. She grabbed the receipt, crumpling it into a tight, pathetic ball and jamming it into the console, wishing she could erase its contents from existence. From her memory. Her phone buzzed, vibrating against the console. For a wild, hopeful second, she thought it might be her husband, a comforting voice to ground her. But the screen lit up with a notification from her work email. Subject: Westgate Tower deal, the deal that had stalled. The source of the day's first major crack. The world was still turning. Her problems were still waiting. Entirely unimpressed by her personal meltdown. Another email followed. A reminder from her son's school. Parent-teacher conference Christopher's behavioral patterns. It was all too much. The pressure from work, the frustrations with her son, the stain on her blouse, and now this grotesque, public unraveling in a common gas station. She wasn't the powerful, unflappable Caroline Vance, queen of commercial real estate. She was a caricature, a screaming, irrational woman in a luxury car, banned from a place that sold cheap coffee and lottery tickets. The thought triggered a fresh wave of hysterical, gulping sobs. Meanwhile, across the lot, Mark Calloway sat in the cab of his Ford F-250. He'd been next in line to pay for his diesel and a bag of beef jerky when Caroline had launched her verbal assault. He'd seen the kid behind the counter, who looked just like his own nephew, shrink and tremble under the onslaught. Something inside Mark, a simple blue-collar sense of fairness, had curdled. When she'd started screaming about grand larceny and threatening lawsuits, he'd done what everyone does now. He'd pulled out his phone. He hadn't recorded her face up close, just a wide shot from the doorway that captured the whole ugly scene, the furious, well-dressed woman jabbing her finger, the terrified cashier, the other customers backing away. The audio, however, was crystal clear. Every shriek, every threat, every drop of venom. He had even caught the calm intervention of the other man and the woman's final, pathetic attempts to blame the cashier for her distraction. He sat there now, watching her SUV where he could just make out the silhouette of her head, bowed in what he hoped was shame. He wasn't a vindictive man, but he believed in consequences. That kid didn't deserve to be treated like that. Nobody did. He opened the video on his phone, trimmed the beginning and end, and uploaded it to his Facebook page, which was mostly just friends, family, and other guys from his construction crew. He gave it a simple, unvarnished title: Lady has a complete meltdown at the Prime Gas on Route 4, accuses poor kid of stealing because she can't read her own receipt. He hesitated for a second, then added a few hashtags. Karen of the Year, Public Freakout, Be Nice to Service Workers, Prime Gas. He hit post. He figured a few of his buddies would get a laugh out of it, maybe share it around. He put his phone down, started his truck, and pulled out of the station, the incident already starting to fade from his mind as he thought about his next job site. He had no idea he had just lit a match and dropped it into a digital tinderbox. The video's initial spread was modest, A share from one of Mark's cousins in another state. A comment from a friend. LOL. I know that gas station. What a psycho. But one of the shares landed on a local community watch page with 20,000 members. There, it found fertile ground. Within an hour, the view count climbed past 50,000. People recognized the location. They recognized the familiar, weary look on the cashier's face. They recognized the specific brand of arrogant entitlement radiating from Caroline. The comments began to pour in, a torrent of digital outrage. That poor employee. I hope he's okay. The nerve of some people. All that and she was wrong. Someone needs to find out who this woman is. Her employer should see this. The algorithm, that invisible, omnipotent god of the internet, took notice. It began pushing the video into the feeds of people who liked similar content, who engaged with rage bait and public justice videos. A popular YouTuber with a channel dedicated to Karen sightings ripped the video and reposted it with commentary. A Twitter account with 2 million followers shared it with the caption, "This might be the final boss of all Karens." The ending is so satisfying. The view count exploded. 100,000, 500,000, a million. It was no longer a local incident. It was content. Caroline Vance was no longer a person. She was a meme, a villain in a 2-minute morality play for the entire world to judge. Her face, though blurry, was clear enough. Her car was identifiable. The internet, with its crowdsourced, relentless detective skills, began to close in. Back in the SUV, Caroline had cried herself out. A cold, gray exhaustion had settled over her. She took a few deep breaths, repaired her mascara in the vanity mirror, and tried to reassemble the shattered pieces of her composure. It's over, she told herself firmly. It was one horrible moment. Nobody knows you. Forget it. Just drive home and forget it ever happened. She put the car in drive, pulling out of the gas station without a backward glance. She turned on the radio to a classical station, hoping the placid strings of Vivaldi could soothe her frayed nerves. It was working. Her breathing steadied. Her grip on the steering wheel loosened. It was just one gas station. She would never go there again. It was fine. Her phone, connected to the car's Bluetooth, began to buzz. A notification. Then another. And another. A relentless cascade of them, a frantic digital hailstorm that broke through the music. It wasn't the rhythmic buzz of an incoming call, but the chaotic, popcorn-like sound of dozens of social media alerts piling on top of each other. Confused and irritated, she pulled into the parking lot of a closed pharmacy. What was this? She picked up her phone. The screen was a frantic waterfall of notifications from Instagram and Facebook, apps she primarily used to see pictures of her friends' children in vacation homes, friend requests from hundreds of people she didn't know. Her direct messages were flooded. Her most recent post, a picture of a sunset from her office window 2 weeks ago, was being inundated with comments. Vicious, hateful comments. Hope you enjoyed your car wash, you miserable shrew. You are a disgrace to the human race. Fire this woman. Her blood ran cold. How? How did these people find her? A message popped up at the top of her screen from a former colleague, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. It contained a link to a Twitter page. The message read, "Caroline, I don't know what's going on, but you need to see this. I am so sorry." With a trembling hand, she clicked the link. It opened to a video player. The title read, "Karen has epic gas station meltdown and gets banned on the spot." She pressed play. The grainy, shaky footage filled the screen. And she saw it. She saw herself. She heard her own voice, distorted by the phone's microphone, but unmistakably hers, screeching those awful, unforgivable words. The camera zoomed in slightly as Detective Hale intervened. It captured her pathetic excuses, the manager's cold fury, the final humiliating verdict of her banishment. Below the video, the view counter was spinning like a slot machine. 1.7 million views. Illuminated by the cold blue light of her own public crucifixion, Caroline Vance stared at the screen, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The private shame she had felt in her car was a gentle rainstorm. This was a tsunami, and it was about to wipe her entire world away. The number on the screen seemed to mock her, 1.7 million. It wasn't a view count. It was a jury. A jury of 1.7 million people who had watched, judged, and convicted her in the space of 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Caroline's breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. A cold sweat prickled at her hairline. The plush, climate-controlled interior of her SUV suddenly felt suffocating, a hermetically sealed chamber of shame. Her thumb, shaking, scrolled down. She couldn't stop herself. She had to see what they were saying to understand the full scope of her own annihilation. It was a journey into a Dantean hell of her own making. Docs Her Now 123 commented, "I found her. Caroline Vance, co-owner of Vance and Sterling Realty in downtown. Let's make her famous, people," Justice for Liam 88 commented. "Look at her expensive car and designer handbag. Thinks she can treat working people like garbage. Not today, sweetheart. Not today." Truthseeker 99 commented, "Google reviews for her business are getting absolutely nuked. We love to see it." Mama Bear Deb commented, "As a mother, I am disgusted. This is the kind of person who raises entitled bullies. I bet her kids are just as awful." The comments were a river of pure, unfiltered vitriol. They dissected her appearance, her tone of voice, the presumed emptiness of her life. They speculated about her marriage, her sanity. They were brutal, invasive, and utterly without mercy. Her private failing had been converted into public entertainment, and the audience was demanding a bloody finale. With a surge of panic, she navigated to her firm's website. It was still up, a placid professional facade of smiling agents and multi-million-dollar properties. Then she checked their Google business page. The shining 5-star rating was gone. In its place was a blood-red 1.5 stars, plummeting with every refresh. The reviews were a firestorm. Owner is a verbal abuser. Would not trust this woman to sell a doghouse, let alone a real house. A video of her screaming at a gas station employee is all over Twitter. Avoid. 0 stars. The Vance in Vance and Sterling is a certifiable monster. Do not support this business. Came here from the video. Just wanted to make sure the world knows what a horrible person Caroline Vance is. You're finished, finished. The word echoed in the silent car. Her first frantic instinct was to hide. She fumbled with her phone, her fingers clumsy and slick with sweat, and deactivated her Facebook and Instagram accounts. A pointless gesture, like closing the barn door after the prize-winning horses had not only bolted, but been broadcast live on every news channel. The video didn't live on her page. It lived everywhere now, multiplying like a virus. Her phone began to ring, the speakers of her car amplifying the shrill, accusatory sound. The caller ID read Julian Sterling, her business partner, the man whose name was intertwined with hers on every sign, every contract, every carefully branded piece of marketing material. Her stomach twisted into a painful knot. She let it ring, the sound an unbearable countdown to a conversation she was not ready to have. It stopped, then immediately started again. He was not giving up. With a deep, trembling breath, she tapped the accept icon on the car's touchscreen. "Caroline," Julian's voice said, tight with a controlled panic. "Tell me you have a good explanation for why I have received 67 emails in the last hour calling you a psychotic harpy, and why our firm's online reputation is currently being set on fire." "Julian, she started, her voice a weak croak. "There was an incident. It was a misunderstanding. The video, it's been edited, taken out of context." The lies sounded flimsy and pathetic even to her own ears. "Out of context?" he shot back, his voice rising. "I saw it, Caroline. The whole world has seen it. Were you or were you not screaming at a young man, accusing him of grand larceny over a $20 car wash?" Silence. "That's what I thought," he seethed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We've spent 15 years building a brand based on trust, prestige, and discretion. You just torched it in 2 minutes for a global audience. The Westgate deal? They just pulled out. Officially. Sent an email to my assistant 30 minutes ago. Mentioned concerns about the firm's leadership and public conduct. They saw the video, Caroline. You didn't just lose your temper. You lost us a $30 million listing." The news landed with the force of a physical blow, knocking the last of the air from her lungs. The deal. The very source of her stress, now irrevocably lost because of her reaction to that stress. It was a perfect, vicious circle of self-sabotage. "Julian, I can fix this," she pleaded, desperation making her voice thin. "I'll issue a statement." "An apology." "An apology?" He laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. It's too late for that. We're in crisis mode. We have agents threatening to walk because their clients are calling them, asking if they work for that crazy woman from the internet. You haven't just damaged your reputation. You've damaged all of us. Don't come into the office. We'll talk tomorrow about the future of the firm. The line went dead. The future of the firm. He meant her future. She was being pushed out. The business she had built, the name she had made for herself, all of it was crumbling. Somehow she drove home. The familiar streets of her affluent neighborhood felt alien, hostile. She imagined her neighbors peering out from behind their curtains, phones in hand, whispering. That's her. The woman from the video. The paranoia was a living thing, crawling over her skin. She pulled into the driveway of her pristine, architect-designed home. It didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a stage. Her husband Richard's car was there. He was home. He knew. Of course he knew. She walked inside, the house unnaturally quiet. Richard was standing in the kitchen, leaning against the marble island, his phone on the counter. He looked up as she entered, his face a grim mask of disappointment and fury. I got a call from Steve, he said, his voice dangerously low. Steve was his golf partner and their mutual friend. He asked me if everything was okay at home. He sent me a video, Caroline. A video of my wife having a psychotic breakdown in a gas station. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? Richard, I was having a bad day. A bad day? He interrupted, his voice rising. We all have bad days. It doesn't give us the right to act like a monster, screaming at that poor kid, threatening him. What is wrong with you? This isn't the first time, is it? Your temper, that incident at the country club, the way you spoke to that waitress last month. I've warned you, but this is a whole new level. This is public. This is forever. He picked up his phone. And it's not just about us anymore. Our son's school principal sent me an email. A parent who saw the video and recognized you from the last PTA meeting sent it to her. She wants to have a meeting about Christopher, about his home environment. That was the final blow. Her son. Her rage had not just affected her business, her marriage. It was now reaching into her child's life, threatening to stain him with her shame. Miles away, in a small, tidy apartment above a laundromat, Liam was sitting on his worn sofa. His manager, Sarah, had sent him home early, telling him to take the next day off as well. He was still shaken, the echoes of Caroline's voice still ringing in his ears. His sister, Chloe, a nursing student, was sitting with him, having brought over pizza. I can't believe that happened, she said, scrolling through her phone. What a horrible woman. Oh, wait. Oh, my God, Liam, what? He asked, taking a bite of pizza. Someone filmed it. It's everywhere. Liam, it has like 2 million views. She turned the phone towards him. He watched, his stomach churning, as his own humiliation was played back for him. But then he scrolled with her through the comments. This kid, Liam, deserves a medal for staying so calm. Someone find this young man and give him a raise. Then Chloe's eyes went wide. Whoa, no way. Look at this. She showed him a link shared in the comments. It was a GoFundMe page. The title was simple. A tip for Liam, the cashier who deserved better. It was started by a woman in Ohio who had been moved by the video. The goal was set to $1,000. She started it an hour ago, Chloe whispered, her voice filled with awe. Liam watched, mesmerized, as she refreshed the page. The total jumped from $850 to $1,200. He watched as she refreshed it again. $2,500. A comment from a donor read, "This is for your college fund. Don't let people like her ever make you feel small." Another refresh, $5,000. Another, $8,000. The number was climbing faster than he could process. A torrent of kindness from thousands of strangers. A direct and overwhelming response to an act of singular cruelty. Tears welled in Liam's eyes, but these were not the tears of fear and frustration he had shed in the store. This was something else entirely. As Caroline Vance's world was being systematically torn apart by an invisible digital mob, his was being rebuilt, piece by piece, by that very same force, with a generosity that felt like a miracle. Wednesday morning broke gray and damp, the light filtering weakly through the expensive floor-to-ceiling windows of Caroline's master bedroom. For 3 blissful, ignorant seconds upon waking, the world was as it should be. She was Caroline Vance, a successful realtor in her beautiful home, married to a successful man. Then memory returned, not as a gentle stream, but as a physical blow, a lead weight slamming into her chest. The gas station, the video, the shame. The nightmare was real, and the daylight made it harsher, not softer. Against every instinct of self-preservation, she reached for her phone on the bedside table. Richard was already gone, having left for the office before she woke, a clear signal of his desire to distance himself from the blast radius of her life. The phone's screen lit up, and the numbers told the story of the night's relentless devastation. The video, now hosted on major news sites and shared by blue-check celebrities, had surpassed 10 million views. Her name, Caroline Vance, was the #3 trending topic on Twitter in North America, right behind a natural disaster and a pop star's surprise album drop. She was no longer just a meme. She was a national news item. A headline from a popular online publication read, "Exclusive, Gas Station Karen, identified as Caroline Vance, co-owner of a luxury real estate firm." They had her picture, a professional, smiling headshot from her company's website that now looked like the mask of a sociopath. Her gaze drifted to the window. Down the street, just beyond the ornate gates of their exclusive community, was a white van with a large satellite dish on its roof, a local news affiliate. They had found her. Her home, once a symbol of her success and a fortress of privacy, was now the destination for a shame tour. She was trapped. Across town, Liam woke to the sound of his sister Chloe making coffee. He had barely slept, his mind buzzing not with fear, but with a giddy, terrifying disbelief. He picked up his phone and looked at the GoFundMe page. The number that had been a miraculous $10,000 when he fell asleep was now staring back at him with an extra digit. 114,382,19. He felt a wave of vertigo. It was more than his father had made in the last 3 years combined. It was college tuition. It was a down payment on a small house. It was a different future, one he had never allowed himself to realistically imagine, materializing on a screen in his hand. His inbox was flooded with messages, emails from strangers offering encouragement, a Facebook message from a financial advisor offering a pro bono consultation, and 3 separate requests for an interview from local news stations. "You have to talk to them," Chloe said, handing him a mug of coffee. Her eyes were bright with excitement and a fierce, protective pride. "Why?" Liam asked, genuinely bewildered. "What am I supposed to say?" "You say thank you," she said simply. "All these people gave you a gift. You need to look them in the eye, through the camera, and say thank you. And," she added, her expression hardening slightly, "you let people see who she was yelling at. A good kid, not a thief. You don't have to tear her down, Liam. You just have to stand there and be you. That'll be enough." The meeting with Julian was at his lawyer's office downtown, a sterile, impersonal space with glass walls and a view of the city that Caroline had once felt she owned. Julian wasn't there when she arrived. He walked in 5 minutes late, accompanied by a woman in a severe gray suit, his lawyer. He didn't meet Caroline's eyes. The conversation was brief and brutal. It was not a negotiation. It was a surrender. "The brand is toxic, Caroline," Julian said, his voice flat, devoid of the friendly warmth that had characterized their 15-year partnership. "Vance and Sterling is finished. The Vance part, specifically. We've had 12 agents quit since yesterday. Every single one of our active listings is on hold. The damage is catastrophic and total." His lawyer slid a thick document across the polished mahogany table. "This is a dissolution and buyout agreement," she stated. "Mr. Sterling will be restructuring under a new firm name. This agreement offers you a one-time payment for your stake in the company, its assets, and all intellectual property, conditional upon your signing of a comprehensive non-disclosure and non-compete agreement." Caroline's eyes scanned the figure on the top page. It was an insult. A fraction of what her half of the business was worth just 48 hours ago. It was enough to live on, but it was not the fortune she had built. This is robbery," she whispered, the irony of the words stinging her tongue. "No," Julian said, finally looking at her, his eyes cold. "This is a lifeboat. The alternative is we declare bankruptcy, dissolve the LLC, and spend the next 2 years in court dividing up debt while our careers wither and die. Your name is a lead weight, Caroline. This allows me to cut it loose so the rest of us don't drown. Take the deal, or we all go down together." She looked at his face, searching for any trace of their shared history, of the long nights and celebratory dinners, the triumphs they had shared. There was nothing, just the cold, hard math of survival. She had made herself a liability, and in the world of business, liabilities are either settled or discarded. With a hand that felt disconnected from her own body, she picked up the pen and signed her name, effectively executing her own professional life. That afternoon, Liam stood in his apartment's small, tidy living room, a microphone clipped to his t-shirt. A friendly local news reporter named Maria sat opposite him, while a cameraman adjusted his light. He was terrified, his heart pounding, but Chloe's words echoed in his head. "Just be you." Maria's questions were gentle. She asked him how he felt, what the last day had been like. He answered honestly, his voice soft. "It's been overwhelming," he said, looking at the camera, imagining the thousands of strangers who had shown him such kindness. "I don't know how to thank everyone. I'm a student at the community college, and I work to help my family and pay for tuition. The money. It's going to change my life. It's going to change my family's life." The woman in the video, Caroline Vance, has faced a lot of public backlash, Maria prompted gently. "Do you have anything you want to say to her?" Liam paused, thinking. He could feel a flicker of the anger and fear from that day, but it was buried under an avalanche of gratitude. He thought about the woman's face, how twisted and unhappy it had looked. He thought about the sheer force of her rage, and it suddenly seemed less like strength and more like a desperate, painful weakness. "No, not really," he said, shaking his head. "I mean, I just hope she was having a really bad day. I hope she can find a way to be happier. I think everyone just deserves to be treated with a little bit of respect. You know? We never know what someone else is going through. But this," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he gestured around, as if to encompass the entire GoFundMe phenomenon, "this shows that there's a lot more kindness out there than anger." Caroline sat in the cavernous, silent media room of her house. She'd been flipping through channels aimlessly, the noise a flimsy barrier against the roaring in her own head. She'd signed the papers. Her company was gone. Her name, which she had worked so hard to build into a brand, was now a synonym for public disgrace. She landed on the local evening news and froze. There he was, Liam. He was in a simple apartment, looking clean-cut and earnest. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Local student's life changed by viral kindness." She watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the reporter asked him about her. Caroline braced herself for the condemnation, for him to call her a monster, to demand she face justice. It's what she deserved. But then he spoke. "I just hope she was having a really bad day. I hope she can find a way to be happier." The words struck her with a force that no insult, no threat, no one-star review ever could. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't vengeful. He was offering her grace. He was wishing her well. This boy, whose life she had casually threatened, whose integrity she had publicly savaged, was looking at a camera and expressing a hope for her happiness. Until that moment, her suffering had been entirely narcissistic. She had mourned her reputation, her business, her social standing. But seeing his quiet dignity, his profound and unearned empathy, she felt a new and unfamiliar emotion surface from the toxic sludge of her self-pity. It was guilt, pure, crushing, undeniable guilt. She had not just been wrong. She had been cruel. And her victim was a better person than she could ever hope to be. The news segment ended, cutting to a slick commercial for a new luxury sedan, a newer model of the one sitting in her garage. The voiceover purred about power, prestige, and the image of success. Caroline Vance stared blankly at the screen, a woman who had possessed all of those things and now understood the value of none of them.